Hi, and welcome to Global Student Voices, the podcast that brings you exciting stories and invaluable insights from students, educators, and thought leaders around the world. I'm your host, Coach Martin, with 30 years of experience in international education. Join us each time when we navigate the exciting journey between international secondary school and university. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Global Student Voices. This is the podcast that brings you inspiring stories and invaluable insights from students, educators, and thought leaders around the world. I'm your host, Coach Martin, with nearly 30 years of experience in international education. Join us each time as we navigate the exciting journey from international secondary school to university. Now, let's get started. I'm super excited today to have three fantastic guests, my dream team of guests. I love talking to students, and I've gotten to know you guys a little bit through your project. But as I got to talk to you guys and hear a little bit about what you guys are doing, I thought this has to be told. Like, it's what you're doing is so cool, and I want other students that might be listening in just to hear a little bit of your path, a little bit of your story, get to know you, because I got to know you, and I think you're amazing. So I want them to get to know you as well. And so that's what we're about today. This show, if people are listening for the first time, is really kind of a coffee shop conversation. I really should send you guys a gift card or something. You could have had coffee in hand. But it's really a coffee shop conversation, just chatting with each other. There's no pressure. And this is people listening in are just kind of eavesdropping on our conversation. So again, no pressure. This is just four people having a fun conversation, and we want, first of all, for people to know who you are. So Christina, kind of kick us off a little bit and introduce yourself.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Hi, my name's Christina Augustine Mikkelsen. I'm 19 years old, half Danish, half Indonesian. My dad is Danish, and my mom's from Indonesia. And yeah, I know Mr. Martin. Since I call him Mr. Martin, he was my old principal in my very first year of high school, which was very special, and I miss him so much.
Oh,
So that's how I know Mr. Martin. And yeah, speaking of my schooling, I attended primary school in Semarang, Central Java, Indonesia, in an Australian curriculum school. It was an international school, and I left after sixth grade since they didn't have a secondary school, and that's where I attended Mountain View Christian School in Salatiga in Salatiga, Central Java. I attended there from 2016 and graduated in 2022. So I completed my whole upper secondary there, which is where I also knew Mr. Martin. And now I am studying in Denmark in Roskilde University. I'm currently studying global humanities, specializing in social psychology and cultural studies.
My name is Katerina Humganberg. I am Danish by nationality. But when I was born, we moved to Tanzania in Eastern Africa, where I lived for 7 years and attended most of my primary schooling in the beginning years at Moshi International School, or ISM International School in Moshi.
yeah.
I am from one international leading family, as we have a family from a bit of all over the world at this point. For me, it's just really interesting to kind of delve into this entire international part, what makes us us, what makes us a part of the world. How do we define ourselves culturally and like identity-wise? Yeah, I'm 26. I live in Copenhagen at the moment, and I also attend Roskilde University. The bachelor is the Danish version of the global humanities, but I specialize in the English ones, social psychology of everyday life and communication, because I think it's important to understand how to communicate properly and how to help people as well with communication. I hopefully will go into some NGO work, primarily focusing on social psychology, maybe some cultural psychology as well. And yeah, that's me.
That's great.
Yes, it's my turn. My name is Thomas Germer. I'm 20 years old and I'm Bulgarian from my mother's side. I'm Danish from my father's side. And when I was 5 years old, we had left for my dad's work to live in Beijing, China, and I lived there for 9 years. And with my schooling there, sorry, there must be some construction. If you can hear it, I'm really
That's
sorry.
okay.
But I was in an international French school doing a bilingual program, both in English teaching and French teaching for 6 years. And then after that, I was strictly in American English international schools. I have also completed the International Baccalaureate high school program. So I'm very used to the whole international scenery and environment on multiple different levels. I've also been taking Bulgarian classes when living in China in the Bulgarian embassy, so there's lots of that as well. And currently, I am a international global humanities student, the same as the rest of the guests on this podcast. And at the moment, I'm specializing in social psychology of everyday life and cultural encounters, and I've dabbled a little bit in communications as well. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So,
Well, this is fantastic. You guys are even more perfect than I could have even imagined. You guys are right in the niche for this field. You guys are experts already. For most of our listeners are just, this is a tangential and you guys are digging into the heart of it. Katerina, before I get distracted, I also lived in Tanzania. I'm very familiar with Moshi. And I did not know that from our other conversation. Somehow I missed
No,
that bit of it. So
my
I
dad,
was there.
my dad grew up there, so we have family living actively in Tanzania at the moment. And my dad,
Okay.
I believe he attended Rift Valley Academy, which is a part of International School of Moshi.
Yeah, I went to Rift Valley Academy
Yeah,
and
did you?
graduated from there. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, what? Oh my gosh. Well, stop it. This is
what are
ridiculous.
the
Okay,
odds?
right? That's crazy. Crazy. Okay, now I'm going to be super distracted this whole time. We're going to have to do another show. We'll get your dad on and you can be on there too. We'll all talk about this whole thing. That's really awesome. Very, very, very cool. So Thomas, I feel like you and I are the least connected now, but we're the two guys, so we got that. Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, all three of you guys are what some would classify as TCKs or cross-cultural kids. You grew up
Mhm.
in cultures, you mix them, and you mix them very richly. I mean, each of you kind of has your own ingredients that make this fantastic mix. Um, and you're all in the same program or overlapping program in university, and so that's what drew you together. Tell me a little bit about this project that you guys worked on, um, and maybe some of your discoveries or kind of what that was like working on with your group.
The project started out in a similar interest in understanding what makes us multicultural. I think we were
Mm,
originally the project was called Navigating Cultures, students moving abroad. So we have a lot of international students in the class, and a lot of exchange students also came into the class during the semester, and we were very interested in like what drives us to move abroad. And that's like the footing of our project. And then it kind of expanded into we began looking at ourselves more than we began looking at at outwards. What makes us go? How do we identify as adults that are people stepping into adulthood that have several cultures in our background? Whether
mm,
we live there, we studied another language. There's so many different stories in the project, and we ended up going a very introspective kind of way. We worked with memory work, writing down memories in certain situations, everything from what our motivation was to our social relationships and cultural challenges we had to overcome. And that's kind of where the project started and ended up.
yeah,
Mm.
very cool.
Yeah, I think that was quite a good overview from Katrina about our whole project. But yeah, I think we first started this project. It was in class in one of our courses, and we were preparing a text by Valsener, I believe, Jan Valsener, and it was about cultural psychology, and it talked about the impacts of culture on the individual. And I remember in class we were asked to discuss, and it just so happens that me, Katerina, and another one of our group members, Selena, we were sat together, and then I forgot who, but we brought up what about mixed culture kids or
Mm,
individuals with multiple cultures, because the text focused so much on like one specific individual coming from one culture.
Yeah.
what about like in this class where we're all so mixed and come from so many places? And I think that's where one of us said like, hey, this could be a project, you know? And yeah, we stuck to it. And yeah, the whole project work process ultimately began there. And yeah, it's like Katrina said, it sprung from there. And people who were interested just came to us. And basically, yeah, that's how we got the ball rolling. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Initially had a lot of people that really wanted to be a part of like, this type of project, splitting up into maybe two, maybe even three different groups, kind of having the
Mm,
same idea of multicultural people with different experiences and different of these that international aspect within their lives. And like for me especially, I found it very interesting even to begin with, starting in this university 2 years ago. So I've always just found it so fascinating that there's been so many people that are like me in the way that it's very international and very blended with each other with different cultural experiences, but also how different those types of things are. How, you know, I can be Bulgarian, but Christina's Indonesian. Those are kind of different, but we still have those same kind of experiences. So we really wanted to kind of explore that even more to see what more can we connect, what differences are there, how can we have this connection in between them. And it was just a really like eye-opening process that was just really accomplishing for me, at least, to be a part of. I thought
Yeah.
it was just fantastic stuff.
Yeah. That's amazing, isn't it? How you can be so
mm,
different as possible, really. And then somehow that difference is what's bring connectedness. Like we have
yeah.
this common experience out of very divergent experiences. Um, and I continued to be fascinated by that. I was fascinated by that when I was at RVA, and we had students from all over, and we had that shared experience at RVA, and so that kind of made sense. I was like, okay, so we were all here. I mean, we're all different, but we all had this in common. Um, and then I found out when I got to college, as you guys have found out, that pretty much everybody that went to an international school, didn't matter which international school they went to, we all kind of were alike, and we even kind of sounded alike, right? The
Mm,
accents are even kind of similar. And you're like, how is that possible, right? I mean, I
yeah.
went to, Thomas goes to an international school in Beijing, and Christina in Indonesia, and Katerina in Tanzania, and somehow come out really similar. It's like seems like so similar, um, and yet different. So, um, any surprises as you guys were putting this project together? Things that were just like, oh my gosh, moments like eye popping.
I'd say there were quite a few.
Mm,
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, one of the main examples kind of that really got us a bit like, wow, like we'd never thought about this was when we started with our project. We decided to go with memory work as our main method for exploring this, which is pretty much you just pick a memory and you just write it out, how you felt in the moment, what you saw, what you heard, things like that, and then taking those memories and kind of analyzing them through that kind of method. And we took that initiative. We're like, okay, let's write these memories. We had made these themes that we wanted to kind of guideline ourselves with. And we had written all these really cool memories. We've read all of them and we got to learn even more about each other, you know. And then we kind of laid all the memories out on little post-it notes on the table. And we thought to ourselves, like, wait, this one and this one, they're kind of contradictory. One of them is positive, one of them is negative. This one and this one, they're kind of like connected. So then we kind of started mixing and matching all of these post-it notes so that we could see this whole like mind map of like that same
Wow.
all the stories and memories are unique and different, but they're all blending through one another like some like a river of thoughts and memories, which was just very like like
Yeah.
it was really kind of mind opening, because then we kind of had like even more to play with and more to work with, and it kind of gave us what our project was like now by the time it finished. Like if it weren't for that, I think it would have been a much different project if we hadn't come to that realization, which was a
Sure.
really cool observation.
mm,
One of the very interesting things that we had to, I think, more like come to terms with, because it became like an obstacle in the middle of the project, was this idea that nobody just has one culture. We
Yeah.
all connect, like we all meet at some point, cross paths with another culture, especially with social media and the globalization of the world. And so we had one group member who is just Danish, who's never lived anywhere else. She studied a bit of Spanish at some point, but that was by her like standard, what she had done culture-wise. And she was struggling a lot with finding her place in the group because she didn't feel like she was multicultural, but she didn't feel like she matched into the umbrella that we were trying to create with the project.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, we had a meeting with another group that was writing something completely different, and their supervisor said that you are not just one culture because you're constantly crossing with new cultures. It's like weaving, that sometimes you will cross paths with something else.
Yes.
So nobody can fully claim to just be a one culture. We're reading different cultures all the time. So some of us might dabble more in one culture or in several cultures. I mean, people who have two parents from each different cultures are constantly doing that clash between cultures. People who have lived in another country or have family from other countries, they're also constantly clashing with those cultures. It's very hard to just remain one cultured.
Mm-hmm.
You're always meeting new things, and you might not always take things with you from that culture, but you're meeting it. You're getting to know it in a bit while you're crossing those cultures, and it's becoming more prominent with as globalization goes on, and as you have transmigration in the world because of different reasons. And I thought that was very interesting to get to know, because it gives you an idea of like, maybe we should begin looking at this. How do we, encapsulate this? What does it have of consequences? And I think one of the things we discussed was that some people just end up being very like one-minded. They don't want to lose the culture that they're from, so they begin rejecting, or they don't feel comfortable getting to know these cultures anymore. Whereas others have an easier time to adapt, and are not as afraid of meeting the new culture.
Hey there, GSV listeners. Before we dive back into our conversation, I wanted to take a moment to thank our incredible guests, the students, school officials, and thought leaders who inspire us with their stories and insights. As you're listening today, be thinking of ways that you can support the guests of this show. There are links in the descriptions with just some of the ways. I'm Coach Martin, your host and your partner in navigating the university journey. Whether you're exploring university options, preparing for admissions, or seeking support during your academic path, my books provide practical guidance and insights to empower your university success. Join me in individual coaching, group sessions, or courses designed to equip you for university life and beyond.
I am from Brazil, but I attended an American school in Indonesia for my secondary education. So you know my situation was really confusing and really scary. Coach Martin really understands global students, and he loves helping us out.
Again, thank you for listening. Explore the podcast description for links and resources and contacts discussed in today's episode. Visit www.theglobalstudentsolutions.com to learn more and embark on your journey toward university success. Now let's return to our conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Aside from what the others have already mentioned, there were a lot of like shocks that came up, but I think the biggest one for me that I took away the most was like the TCK theory itself, which was like basically we intended for it to be the underlying theory throughout the whole project. But as we did this project through the means of collaborative autoethnography, which is basically autoethnography, which is a methodology that you use to write about yourself. Basically, it's usually your experiences through poetry or through journals, basically writing about yourself. And the collaborative aspect comes in the analysis section where you discuss with each other.
Sure.
That's where the collaborative aspect comes in. But that plus the memory work that Thomas explained earlier, it made me realize personally that even people who don't really fit into the category of a TCK experience similar things to TCKs as well. Like, for example, there was an exchange student in our group, fully Vietnamese, only grew up in Vietnam. However, in her memory writing, she did write about how she felt like she didn't belong, and the way she thought about relationships in her mind, it very much resonated with like the way I perceive relationships in my mind, because she started describing relationships as little towns. So depending on where she is, so she has this one town back in Vietnam, this one town in the US, and one town here in Copenhagen. And that's just so interesting because the TCK theory explains that that's how it is because of how individuals who fit into TCK, they form groups and relationships based on wherever they move. So there's so many, but they don't truly feel like they fit into a specific one. And I think that's so interesting because now that I think about it, like the TCK theory could be adapted more, and it could even be like, you could even label it as a completely different theory, maybe like international students, for example, because as Katrina mentioned, like now the world is becoming so mixed and so you cross culture so much that maybe there's no need for a label to be third culture kids, you know. So
That's fantastic, and you basically just drew the line between this episode and one I did a couple of weeks ago with Ruth Van Ryken, who helped write the TCK theory.
right.
She was on the show, and she basically said the same thing, that she has, like, if she writes another edition, it will be called cross-cultural kids or cross-cultural people, because just humanity has changed from when they initially wrote the TCK theory. So you guys are right on it. She's going to be so excited to hear your story. She's actually working with a group of students at Purdue University who are doing a very similar project to what you guys are doing, and they're trying to create kind of a social support network for college campuses for folks like us to be able to connect with each other. And I'm hoping to have them on the show in August. So it's just very cool to hear kind of all this interconnectedness and at least how I hear it. And Ruth was amazing. She's just, oh my gosh. I wish I'd known her before so I could have introduced you to her when you were doing your research, because that would have been really amazing. But I will definitely share your stuff with her, and she'll be excited to see it. But that's so cool. So anything from your own, like, was there an empowerment moment or like a value added, like to you personally, that you just came away and were like, I don't know how to say this, felt better about yourself as you learned about the theories and experiences of others? It's a really hard question and a very unfair one to ask on the spot. This is one you should ask beforehand. I'm learning how to be a host, so.
You're doing good. You're doing good. You just need to think really quick.
I think for me, because there was a point where, because mine is from when I was a kid. When I lived in Tanzania from when I was 3 weeks old to 7 years, and then we moved back to Denmark because of job changes. A lot of it ended up when we were beginning to choosing who we are focusing on. We ended up focusing on university students. There was a moment where I was like, I don't know if I fit into this like umbrella that we're making, because this was when I was so young. I was a child. Most of the memories that I have, I don't remember. The ones that I do are incredibly, how do you say? It can be like it's from a child's perspective. So there are some things that are inconsistent. And I remember one of our teammates just kind of looking at me, and she went, all of your experiences are in your most formative years. So the memories that you're writing, I think mine was a lot about, the motivation was a lot about helping people. That there is an understanding that living in Denmark, being a Danish citizen, puts me in a position of privilege with education and healthcare, with general wealth. And then I didn't see in the streets in Tanzania. It has changed a lot now, but there's still a lot of poverty. There's still a lot of problems down there that needs to be solved. And I think when she said, like, this is your formative years there has effect on you now, which means that you seek out actively studying international studies or studies based in English, that it can project you into the international world to work. And that is because you live there. And those memories and that motivation is very important when it comes to stuff like this. And that makes it really important for you to be a part of this project, because this is one voice that might not be represented if you do not do this project. And I thought that was very important, that even if you're really, really young, and you go back home, so to speak, your experience matters a lot because it has an effect on you in the future. And for me, it's a very positive effect in a way because I aim to work with NGOs, non-profit organizations. I want to do that work. I want to go out into the world and to help solve some of these problems, solve some of this disparity between countries. And that comes from living in an environment where I had to watch that, I had to see that on a daily basis. And those memories and that motivation is very important, not only for memory work, but for my life going forward. And a lot of, we were talking about social challenges, a lot of challenges that I meet are people going like, but you're a woman. Why would you want to go into countries that have these kind of problems, because they're not necessarily looking at women very nicely. And it's just, it doesn't matter to me what challenges I face. What matters is the goal, and that is to try to help people and try to balance scales in a sense. And that was just something that really stood out to me when we were talking about it, and really just kind of gave me even more motivation to finish this project and to try to do really well at the project.
Yeah. Wow. Very insightful. What an amazing classmate partner.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. I was gonna say
follow that.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Honestly,
Yeah, it was really good.
and we talked that times, like
We'll try.
Yeah.
But I guess one thing for me that I kind of not necessarily learned, but I guess reminded myself of was the fact that, having that sense of belonging within this type of international community, how strong it is and how important it is. Because, I mean, even before doing this project, I've always known how it's made my life very, I guess, pleasant to say the least. I mean, I'm very happy with, the way that my life has gone, the friends that I've met, the connections I've made, and everything like that. And I've always noticed that, being a Bulgarian, having lived in Bulgaria for all of high school, I've noticed the differences between my life and my social circle and the type of people I'm surrounded with versus like regular Bulgarian schools or Bulgarian people. And there's, very messy government, in my opinion, and it's pretty homophobic at times, and there's just lots of stuff that is like a different world to the type of life I was living when I was living and studying in international school. But then after doing this project, I was kind of reminded of how important that is and how that sense of belonging and it being so strong, how important it is for someone's self-identity and self-worth. Because we, throughout a lot of the discussions for this research project we did, and just in our own time when we were just talking just out of pure interest, there were a few stories where they, obviously don't have as much international experience as I might have. I have almost a whole lifelong experience with internationals, and some of our other group members did not have that, and they kind of were talking about that sense of that relief and that sense of acceptance, something they've never felt before. It's like, I finally found something that I really want to do, people I want to be around, a place where I want to stay. And I was kind of reminded about like, well, that's really something that I need to, because sometimes I might take it for granted a little bit, and it's just, to me, it's a very special thing to be a part of an international community, whether it's a school or a cultural center, or having a spouse or boyfriend or a girlfriend that's a different culture than yours, anything like that. It can be very special because you can learn so many new things and you can teach them so many new things. And it's just an extra layer of that bond with like amongst people, which kind of strengthens a lot of societies, in my opinion. So it's a very important thing to be able to be international and belong, I think.
Like both of you guys are really good. Like your comments are very insightful. It really is. And my sort of answer kind of correlates to both of yours. But yeah, I think like after this project, I realized how much of like for me personally, my actions are based on belonging, and how like I do everything I can to belong. But after this project, I also realized that sometimes it's okay, like not to, it sounds so cheesy, but like it's okay not to belong to one place, especially when you've established a home someplace else. Especially in my case, it's Denmark and Indonesia are like halfway across the world, literally like 20 hours traveling away. And that's perfectly fine to just have a feeling of home in one place and a feeling of home in another. Of course, the challenges that come with it can be difficult. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, it's very much about social relationships as well, who you surround yourself with. Like Thomas mentioned, like it's so important for internationals to surround themselves with people who are, I feel like, are much more like open-minded and so much more, maybe even like-minded to the internationals themselves. Because yeah, it's not everybody gets the same experience as international students or third culture kids or cross-culture individuals, and it's just important to have that representation as well that Katrina mentioned. And speaking of representation, I think this project, the reason I would really like to do it as well is because of our use of autoethnography. I've always been a fan of autoethnography. I've done it once before last semester, and it's just a great way for me to introduce my culture to a setting. I think our university setting is quite Western, especially very Danish, I would say. And they don't get much representation, you know, and especially where I'm from, Indonesia, even though I'm half Danish, I resonate much more, or I identify much more with Indonesia. And I would like to communicate that through the project, through my words and my experiences, since autoethnography would allow me to do that. And I just think it's also so important for there to be representation, especially from a culture that is like a minority culture in this case. In Denmark, there's not many Indonesians at all, not many Indonesian stories. So I just think it's important to have that. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think that there's some, you guys touched on obviously the belonging thing, which is huge. And I think for all of us who have this cross-cultural, multicultural, intercultural life experience, the struggle for all of us, I think, is finding a place where we belong and looking for a place that we belong, when I think it's surrounding ourselves with people whom we belong with that actually works.
Yeah.
And you guys have found that, and I think that's wonderful, and obviously leads to a much richer, happier, more joy-filled life experience when you have people to share it with. And so I'm so glad you guys found each other in this project. When we started, I said, you know, we only have to do a half an hour, so don't feel the pressure. But we are well past that, and that was easy. I feel like I'm just beginning. I want to do another 3 hours. You guys have all taught me stuff that I need to explore more, and I'm very sad that we'll have to cut this off for today. But that doesn't mean that we're ending these conversations. I hope these are discussion starters for students around the country. I hope the teachers take your lessons in terms of the importance of sharing story, and we'll explore the methodology that you guys talked about, because I think that is huge, and I want to learn more about that. So I've got other things I need to talk to you guys about. But thank you so much for being on this podcast and sharing your stories and your learning.
Thank you for having us.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
So with that, we're gonna go away, and we'll be back with another episode on the Global Student Voices. Thank you again to Thomas, Christina, and Katarina. It was wonderful to have you. Thanks for tuning into Global Student Voices. We're committed to bringing you the best advice and to share stories from global students and educators. We need your help. Make sure you subscribe, share, rate, and review our podcast. Follow us on social media for more updates, and we'll see you next time. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring.